The family dinner was supposed to be a peaceful evening, a rare gathering where everyone came together. But as soon as Marie whispered something in David's ear, the atmosphere shifted. He looked at me with such suspicion, his eyes narrowing as if the world had changed in that single moment. "Is it true?" he asked, his voice laced with doubt, betraying the trust we'd built over the years. Marie, always polished, wore a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her words were carefully chosen, each one meant to plant a seed of mistrust in David's mind. "You know, David, I've heard things," she murmured, her gaze never leaving me. I froze, my heart racing. The accusation hung in the air like a storm cloud. "I'm not who you think I am." I wanted to ask, but the words caught in my throat. David's face, once warm and loving, now held a flicker of doubt. And in that instant, everything I had worked for seemed to crumble. I sat there in silence, the weight of David's words sinking deeper with every passing second. His doubt was palpable, and the air between us felt thicker than ever. My mind raced, desperately trying to find something to say, something that would prove Marie wrong. But every time I opened my mouth, the words seemed to disappear, leaving only a heavy silence in their place. David's eyes were colder now, his gaze shifting back and forth from me to his mother, as if waiting for something else to confirm the accusation. I tried to meet his gaze, but he wouldn't look at me long enough to catch my eye. Marie, of course, was the picture of innocence, her lips curled into a sweet smile. But there was something in her eyes, something calculating. I had seen that look before, whenever she wanted something. I had hoped that tonight would be different, that she wouldn't tear our lives apart again. But here we were. And the truth was, I didn't know how much longer I could stand by while she tore at the fabric of everything I had worked for. "I just don't understand, Emma," David muttered, his voice barely audible, as though he were speaking to himself. His hands gripped the edge of his seat, his knuckles white, betraying the strain in his body. "How could you not tell me about this?" His words cut through me like a blade, each one more painful than the last. My stomach churned, and I swallowed hard, trying to push down the panic rising in my chest. "David, I swear to you nothing happened," I pleaded, my voice shaking. But I could see the skepticism written all over his face. The trust was gone, replaced with doubt. I glanced at Marie, whose smug expression remained unchanged. She had succeeded in planting that seed of doubt, and now, no matter how hard I tried to explain, I felt like I was talking to a wall. David's eyes flickered back to me, his expression uncertain, as if torn between the woman he had loved for years, and the woman who had always been there, pulling at the strings of his life. The silence stretched between us like an ocean, and the more I tried to swim toward him, the farther he seemed to drift away. I could feel the tears welling up, but I refused to let them fall. I couldn't break down in front of them. Not in front of David, who was supposed to be my partner, my ally. Not in front of Marie, who had orchestrated this whole thing. The silence stretched on, suffocating me, until I finally spoke. "David, I don't know what she's been telling you, but I would never hurt you. I love you." The words came out strained, my voice a broken whisper. I wanted to say more, to make him understand, but the doubt in his eyes stopped me. Instead, I stood up from the table, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on me. "I'm going to bed," I muttered, not waiting for a response. I couldn't be here anymore, not with Marie's presence lingering in every corner of the room, poisoning everything. I left the room quickly, avoiding the looks of pity from the other family members. But I could feel David's eyes on me, his unspoken question hanging in the air. Would he believe me? Or was I already lost? Alone in the quiet of the bedroom, I collapsed onto the bed, my heart still racing from the confrontation. I tried to tell myself it was going to be okay, that David would come around, but deep down, I feared that the trust we once had was already gone. The pain of betrayal stung more than I had imagined. It wasn't just Marie's words that hurt, it was David's doubt. The very person I thought I could trust had turned on me so easily. I curled up on the bed, my arms wrapped around myself as if trying to hold on to whatever dignity I had left. My thoughts spiraled, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't escape the feeling that this was only the beginning. Marie had set her trap, and now, There was no telling how much damage had been done. The days that followed were filled with silence, an uncomfortable stillness that settled over our home. David and I barely spoke, and when we did, it was always about trivial things, never about what had happened. Every glance he gave me felt like a question I couldn't answer. Marie had done her job well. Her words lingered in the air, poisoning every conversation, every quiet moment. I couldn't help but wonder if David truly believed her. His hesitation when we spoke felt like a betrayal, a subtle but painful shift. Each day, the space between us grew wider, and I began to lose hope that he would ever look at me the same way again. Marie's presence became a constant fixture, her subtle manipulation weaving its way into every conversation. One evening, she suggested David take a trip with her. Just the two of them. "It'll give you some time to clear your head," she said, her voice oozing sweetness. I couldn't help but feel like it was another attempt to drive a wedge between us. David agreed, of course. How could he not? His mother always had a way of making him feel guilty for wanting something different. And there I was, alone again, watching as she took control, slowly slipping her influence into every aspect of our lives. Conversation with David that night was different. He was quieter, more withdrawn, and it became increasingly clear that Marie's influence had taken root deeper than I had imagined. "Maybe she's right, Emma," David said softly, almost as though he were trying to convince himself. "You've been acting strange lately, distant." My heart sank. Was this really happening? "I'm not distant, David. I'm just hurt by what's been happening between us," I replied, my voice faltering. But the doubt in his eyes was still there, and it seemed to be growing. I was losing him piece by piece, and no matter what I said, I couldn't stop it. As the days passed, I noticed David pulling away more and more. He stopped calling me during the day, and began spending more time with Marie. It was subtle at first, but it quickly became obvious. One evening, as he prepared to leave for another one of their trips, I tried to speak up. "David, please, don't let her control everything. I'm your wife, not her." He looked at me, and for a brief moment, I saw something flicker in his eyes. But it was gone before I could catch it. "I need this time, Emma. Just let me be," he said, his voice distant. And just like that, I was left standing alone in the doorway, feeling as though I had lost him for good. That night, I lay awake, unable to sleep, my mind racing. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw David's face, his eyes filled with doubt, his voice laced with uncertainty. I had tried everything to fix it, but nothing seemed to work. The more I tried, the more I felt myself slipping away from him. I wanted to believe that things could go back to normal, but deep down, I knew they never would. The damage had been done, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep pretending everything was fine. I had become a stranger in my own life, caught in the middle of a battle I didn't ask for, and I didn't know how to escape. I couldn't stay silent any longer. That night, as I sorted through the old box of letters I'd been meaning to go through for months, I found something that changed everything. There it was, tucked away beneath the old photographs and forgotten mementos, David's handwriting. My hands trembled as I read through the letter. It was from Marie, addressed to David, filled with hidden truths and promises. She had been manipulating him far longer than I had realized. I was shocked, not only by the revelations in the letter, but by how well she had hidden this part of her life. There, in black and white, was proof that she had known far more about our lives than I ever could have imagined. It felt like the floor dropped out from beneath me. The carefully constructed lies I had believed for so long were starting to crumble. I couldn't just sit there, not when I had discovered the truth. The next morning I confronted David. His face turned pale as I laid the letter out in front of him. "David, explain this," I demanded, my voice shaky but firm. He stammered, unable to find the words. "It's not what you think," he finally said, but the guilt in his eyes betrayed him. "Marie, she's been influencing me, Emma, for a long time. I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't see it before." The weight of his admission hit me like a ton of bricks. My heart raced. This wasn't just about his mother's lies. It was about his blindness to them. The distance between us felt insurmountable, and I wasn't sure we could ever repair the damage done. The truth was out, but it only left more questions, more broken pieces I didn't know how to put back together. David tried to explain, but his words felt empty. "I thought she was just trying to help," he said, his voice cracking. "I didn't realize. I didn't understand how deep it went." I felt a sting of anger. "You didn't understand. You've been blinded by her for so long, David. You let her control every decision we made. And now I'm supposed to just forgive you." His eyes welled with tears as he reached for me, but I pulled away. "I'm not sure how we fix this, David. I don't even know if I can trust you anymore." The doubt I had feared had taken root in my heart, and no amount of apologies could make it go away. He looked at me, helpless, and for the first time I realized just how broken we were. I spent the rest of the day in a haze. Everything I thought I knew about David, about our life, felt like a lie. Marie's influence was more pervasive than I could have imagined. The thought of it made me sick. I tried to focus, but I couldn't stop thinking about what David had said. He had been so vulnerable, admitting his mistakes, but it didn't feel like enough. Later that evening, I overheard him speaking to his mother on the phone, his voice soft and hesitant. "I need to fix things with Emma, Mom, but I don't know how." I wanted to burst in, demand answers, but I stayed silent. The realization hit me hard. David wasn't just caught in her web, he was still tangled in it, unwilling to break free. And I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep fighting for us. The next morning, I decided to confront Marie. If David wasn't going to stand up to her, then I would. I walked into her house, the anger simmering just beneath the surface. "I know what you've been doing, Marie," I said, my voice steady, despite the rush of emotions. "I know you've been controlling David, manipulating him for years." She didn't even flinch. Instead, she smirked, as though she had expected this moment. "He's my son, Emma. I'm just looking out for him," she said, her tone cold and dismissive. "If you want him, you'll have to prove yourself not to me but to him." The words stung, but I couldn't back down now. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about taking control of my life and my marriage. "I'll fight for him, Marie. I'll fight for us." The dinner party was supposed to be a chance for us all to come together, but I could feel the tension thick in the air. I could hardly breathe as I sat there, knowing what was about to unfold. David had been distant, but today he seemed different, more focused, more determined. He hadn't said a word about Marie's manipulations, and I wondered if he had finally come to his senses. As the meal went on, I could feel my heart pounding, waiting for the right moment. Finally, David stood up, looking straight at his mother. "We need to talk," he said, his voice trembling but firm. The room fell silent. All eyes were on him, and for the first time in months, I saw a spark of the man I had married. He wasn't just defending me, he was confronting his mother, ready to expose everything. David's words hung in the air, and for a moment, I thought Marie would break. But instead, she smirked, the mask slipping for just a second. "You're making a mistake, David," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "You don't know what you're dealing with." Her words were sharp, but they didn't have the same power they once did. David was no longer the scared boy she had manipulated for years. "No, Marie," he replied, his voice steady. "You've controlled me for far too long, and it's over." The room held its breath as the truth unfolded. The confrontation wasn't just about me or Marie. It was about David finally seeing his mother for who she truly was. I wanted to speak, to tell him how proud I was of him, but the moment was too raw, too fragile. All I could do was watch as the final act of betrayal unraveled before us. Marie's composure shattered as she stood up abruptly, knocking her chair back. "You ungrateful little," she began, but David cut her off. "Don't. Just don't," he said, his voice rising, the frustration evident. "I've had enough of your lies. I've seen the letters, the lies you've fed me, the way you've tried to turn me against Emma. I won't stand by and let you destroy my life any longer." He was shaking with emotion, his anger building. "You were never just protecting me, Marie. You were controlling me." His voice cracked, and I could see the weight of years of manipulation finally lifting from him. The silence that followed was deafening. Marie stood there, speechless for the first time, as the reality of her actions hit her. Marie's face twisted in fury as she stepped back. "You'll regret this, David," she hissed, her voice full of venom. "You can't escape me. I'll ruin everything you've built." But David stood his ground. "Not anymore," he said, his voice low but resolute. For a moment Marie stared at him, her anger giving way to something darker, more desperate. She knew she had lost. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. David had finally broken free from her grasp. The room was still, as though the very air was holding its breath. I could feel my heart racing, the realization that this was the moment we would either rebuild or tear apart. There was no going back from here. With a final defeated glance, Marie turned and stormed out of the room, her heels clicking sharply on the hardwood floor. The silence that followed felt both oppressive and freeing. I looked at David, his face pale and worn but finally free of the burden he had carried for so long. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He nodded, but there was something different in his eyes now, something that hadn't been there before. The trust, the connection, it was still fragile, but it was real again. "We'll be okay," he said softly. I wanted to believe him. And for the first time in a long time, I thought maybe, just maybe, we would be. The days that followed were filled with both healing and reflection. David and I worked through the pain, piece by piece. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when I wasn't sure we would make it, but we were trying. He began to understand the depth of Marie's manipulation, and how much it had affected him. "I should have seen it sooner," he admitted one evening, his voice thick with regret. "I let her get between us for far too long." His words weren't just an apology, they were a vow to change. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a flicker of hope. It wasn't going to be an easy road, but we would walk it together, and that made all the difference. David began to take more responsibility for his actions. He cut off all communication with his mother, setting firm boundaries that he had never established before. It was difficult for him, but he knew it was necessary. "I don't want to lose you," he told me one night, his voice soft but urgent. "I don't want to live in a world where I let her dictate everything." Those words meant more to me than anything else. I saw the man I had married, strong, protective, and ready to stand by me. We were rebuilding, slowly, but we were moving forward. The family dynamic was slowly starting to shift. We began attending therapy together, working on rebuilding the trust that had been shattered. It wasn't easy. There were times when I felt like giving up, but each session brought us closer to understanding each other. "I'm sorry for not seeing it sooner," David said during one session, his voice breaking. "I didn't realize how much her influence had taken hold. I don't want to lose you again." I reached out, taking his hand, feeling the sincerity in his touch. "We'll get through this together," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. As the weeks went by, I started to feel like I was getting back to myself. It was a slow process, but I began to trust again, not just David, but myself. I started to feel the weight lift off my shoulders, the constant anxiety of Marie's shadow no longer hanging over us. One evening, as we were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset, David turned to me. "I love you," he said, his voice steady and filled with emotion. "I know I've made mistakes, but I'm here now. I'm here to stay." I smiled, my heart swelling with a mixture of relief and joy. "I love you too," I replied. "And I'm glad you're here." The last few months had been a whirlwind of healing and change. David and I had worked through the darkest parts of our marriage, and though it wasn't perfect, it was ours. We had come through the storm, and now we were stronger because of it. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, just the two of us, David looked at me, his eyes filled with gratitude. "I don't know where I'd be without you, Emma," he said, his voice sincere. "You saved me." I reached across the table and took his hand. "No," I said softly, "we saved each other." And in that moment, I realized how far we had come, together. The days after the confrontation with Marie felt oddly quiet. The house was calm, but there was an unsettling stillness in the air. David had finally seen the truth, and he was starting to come to terms with it, but I wasn't sure if I could ever forgive his mother. That night, I sat alone in the living room, looking out the window at the stars. I had hoped that we would come out of this stronger, but I realized that sometimes things can never be the same. I didn't know if we were truly free, or if the past would haunt us forever. In the end, it wasn't about what David and I had gone through, but about how much control Marie had lost. I would never call her mother again. I didn't expect to hear from Marie again, but there she was, standing in our doorway. Her eyes were cold, filled with a mixture of anger, and something I couldn't quite name. "I don't know what you think you've won, Emma," she said, her voice sharp and cutting. "But you haven't taken anything from me. You've only destroyed him." I stood there, silent, staring at her. For a moment, I felt the anger rise, but then it passed. "I didn't destroy him, Marie. I saved him." She sneered, her lips curling into a thin, cruel smile. "We'll see about that." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving me with the knowledge that this war, in some way, was far from over. Following days were filled with an overwhelming sense of relief, but also of uncertainty. David and I had been through so much, and I knew it wasn't over. The shadows of Marie's influence still lingered in the back of my mind. "Do you think she'll ever really leave us alone?" I asked David one evening as we sat on the porch. He looked at me, his face filled with both exhaustion and resolve. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I'm not going to let her control us anymore. Not now, not ever again." I wanted to believe him, but a part of me wasn't sure if we could ever truly escape her grasp. I took his hand and squeezed it, knowing that for now, this was all we could do, fight to hold on to what we had. The silence in the house felt heavy, but it wasn't just because of Marie's absence. David and I were still figuring out how to rebuild, and it was clear that the road ahead wasn't easy. One evening, as we sat together in the living room, he reached for my hand. "I want us to be happy again," he said quietly, his voice soft. "I don't want to keep living in her shadow." I looked at him, my heart heavy with both fear and hope. "I want that too," I whispered. But as much as I wanted to believe things would return to normal, I knew it would take time. Time to rebuild trust, time to heal from the wounds that had been inflicted. But for the first time in a long time, I believed it was possible. Days turned into weeks, and gradually, I started to feel the weight lift. We were rebuilding our lives, step by step, and though the scars of the past remained, they no longer defined us. One afternoon, as we walked through the park, David turned to me, his eyes filled with quiet joy. "We made it, Emma," he said, his voice filled with a mixture of relief and gratitude. I smiled, my heart swelling with pride. "We did," I agreed. Together. As we walked hand in hand, the past no longer seemed as haunting. We had overcome so much, and now it was time to move forward, together. Life slowly returned to a quiet rhythm. The turmoil of the past seemed to be fading, though the scars remained. David and I had found our balance again, but it was fragile, like a delicate thread holding us together. There were moments of doubt, moments when the past crept in, but we faced them together, stronger than before. "Do you think we'll ever be truly free of her?" I asked David one night, my voice quiet but filled with concern. He looked at me, his eyes steady, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "We're free now, Emma," he said softly. "We've made it through, and no matter what happens, I won't let her tear us apart again." In that moment I believed him. For the first time I felt that we had really won. The quiet life we had been working toward finally felt real. There were still moments of tension, especially when David's family reached out, but we navigated those moments with a new sense of strength. We had learned how to set boundaries and protect our peace. One evening, David turned to me, his voice full of warmth. "I know it wasn't easy, but I'm glad we fought for this." His words were simple, but they carried so much weight. Me, too, I replied, my heart swelling with gratitude. It's worth it. Every moment. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like the storm had passed. One day, as we walked through the park near our home, I saw the children playing, their laughter ringing in the air. For the first time I realized that the future wasn't just about us anymore. It was about the new generations we were nurturing, away from the toxic influence of the past. I can't believe how far we've come, I said to David, my voice soft but filled with emotion. He smiled, squeezing my hand. We've made it through, Emma. And now, we have a chance to build something beautiful. As we walked together, I realized how much had changed, not just for us, but for the future we were building. The years went on, and life became simpler, quieter. We moved forward with no need to look back. The echoes of the past remained, but they no longer held any power over us. One afternoon as we sat together, David turned to me with a look of contentment in his eyes. I think we're finally free, Emma. Truly free. And in that moment, I realized how much I had changed. I was no longer the woman who had been controlled by fear and manipulation. I was strong, independent, and unafraid of the future. We had built something together, something that no one could take away from us. The past was behind us, and all that mattered now was the life we were creating. And then, the quiet returned. The house, once filled with tension and uncertainty, was now a place of calm and love. We had come full circle, and though the scars remained, they no longer defined us. There was one final moment I would never forget. From that day forward, no one ever called her mother again, I whispered to David one night, as we lay in bed. He nodded, a quiet understanding passing between us. It was the final, definitive closure. We were free,